it just makes me feel like a puddle of tears. My existence is liquid right now. Evike. The pronunciation is not helping me. Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the next book box catch-up, which is going to be Illumicrate. You guys really surprised me when I checked the poll and I saw that Illumicrate was like way beating out anything, and then Outcrate was in second place. I kind of just assumed that everyone would pick Fairy Loot again. And if you're not a subscriber, what I'm talking about is I let my subscribers of my channel vote on what book box I'm going to catch up next. And this time I actually included which books I'll be reading. And I will say though, I normally only put 3 books in there, but if I do DNF a book and I DNF it rather early, I will read the next one in like my list. So there could always be like more books in there included, but hopefully most of the time it will just be the 3 that I include in the little poll thing. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you see those polls and you can vote which book box I'll do next. But we're doing Illumicrate today. We are going to be catching up on Illumicrate, and that's frightening and exciting at the same time because I know why you guys did this to me. I know why you did it, and it's one of the book choices because I knew when I put it up, I'm like, are they gonna be mean and really make me read this book? And yeah, you guys were. I so appreciate it. So appreciate it. So let's talk about the books that I'm gonna be reading in this vlog. Of course, I always go in order from oldest to newest. So first we are going to be starting with The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. I have started this one already as usual. I tend to always start my vlogs like film the intro after I've read at least 50 pages of the very first book I'm going to be reading so that I can kind of talk about it in the intro a little bit so I actually know what I'm talking about and I don't sound like a moron, which is kind of on par for me most of the time. But this is going to be the very first one we read, and I'm very nervous about this one because this is Ava Reid. Ava Reid wrote Juniper and Thorn, which I really didn't like. I DNF'd that at probably 60-70 pages. Didn't like the writing style, didn't like what was going on in the story, just was not a fan, especially of that writing style. Second, we are going to pick up She Who Became the Sun. I am really excited about this one. So this book is actually historical fiction. I don't know if this is actually a fantasy book because I'm not seeing any like magic, etc. This seems more based in like real actual life, and it looks like it's going to be following a daughter who has to take on the identity of her brother, I think. And she is going to go away to like some monastery and learn how to be a warrior, etc. So very interested. I try to go in a lot of these books blind because if I know too much about them, sometimes that makes me really not want to read them, and then I put it off and I put it off. So that's all I'm gonna know about this one. And then the last one, the one that you guys are punishing me with, I'm sure this is the reason why this one was picked. Empire of the Vampire. This so mean. It's so mean. It's enormous. And I literally just finished Pride of the Orange Tree. I don't mind saying it because that video is going to be out way before this one ever is finished. I picked it for my March Wheel of No Appeal and it took me 3 months to read. So this, I'm going to try not to take that long on this one, but guys, so mean. This one is about 720 pages, and it has like illustrations in it, and it looks so cool. And I'm really excited, but like, I know Jay Kristoff just like breaks hearts. So this is actually going to be my first like Jay Kristoff alone book because I have read the Illuminate series and I absolutely love them, but Amy Kaufman is also an author of that, so I don't know how much of her writing style like took over the book compared to his. So I feel like I'm about to learn the difference between him and Amy Kaufman's writing styles as I read this one. So I am very nervous. I just know it's a very long fantasy book about vampires, and that's pretty much it. So Vampire Hunter sounds like I'm really excited about this one. It's so pretty, but I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. So so this vlog is going to be completely spoiler free, but let's talk about the book that I've already started. So The Wolf and the Woodsman is very interesting. We are following our main character. I'm never going to be able to say these names. Evika. Oh, wait, they have pronunciations in the back. Hold on. Evike. The pronunciation is not helping me because V-I-H. I'm like, how do you say V-I-H? A V. V? I can't. I literally can't. I'm just gonna say it's a VK. So we're following our main character, Vike, who is from this, like, tiny little village who still follows this other religion while the rest of, like, the continent that they're on follows the new king's religion, and they are only left in peace because they they basically, the king's men, the Woodsmen, come and they take a girl. I don't think they said how often, but they come and take a girl who has powers to bring back to the king. I'm assuming that he uses the powers for his own gains. I'm not sure exactly where it's going from there, but we do know that they take girls who have powers because this little village has like their own type of magic and their own belief system, etc. So of course our book opens up with her being taken, but she's very different than the rest of her like tribe because she actually doesn't have any powers while everybody else does. So very interesting opening to the book. I was really concerned that I was not going to like the writing style, but to me it's completely different than Juniper and Thorn. I am at page 52. I just started chapter 4 and I'm enjoying it. I will say it's bloody. Oh my gosh. There are already some very gory scenes that I was like, oh, this is nasty. This is so nasty. But gore doesn't super bother me in books, so luckily it's not really bugging me. But if you don't like any type of gore in books, descriptions of things, then I would probably avoid this one because I'm only 4 chapters in and there have already been 3 scenes of grotesque gore that has been happening. So it's very action-packed already too. Within 50 pages has already been just like a lot of stuff happening. So I'm really enjoying this so far, actually. Very surprised. I had very low expectations when I found out this is the same author as Juniper and Thorn. My biggest qualm with this is I feel like I don't understand a large portion of the world that she's already trying to explain to us. I feel like we jumped in so fast and had brief understandings of magic. There's like no understanding of the magic system at all. I don't really get what's happening with the magic, and I definitely don't really understand the difference between the 2 different like religious groups. So I hope that gets expanded upon later because I'm in the dark there. I really don't get it. But otherwise, I'm actually really enjoying it. I'm going to continue reading this. I worked yesterday, so today is Tuesday, May 15th. Oh no, Tuesday, May 16th. Yesterday was the 15th. I don't work again until Saturday, so I'm kind of hoping I can get through this one and She Who Became the Sun. I would love that if I could get through both of those, and then next week I can basically devote all my time to Empire of the Vampire. So that's kind of my hope. Yeah, I'm starting to lose train of thought here. So I'm just gonna stop it here. We're gonna go read and I'll update you later in the book. I don't know when I'm gonna update, maybe if my feelings change or I get through about halfway. So that's kind of, the way I update is different in every video. It's just kind of how I'm feeling at the time. And sometimes I'll just come back and I have finished the book and I'm like, oh well. Okay, it is kind of dark in here, so I don't know how well this is going to translate in a video, but this is just a very quick update because I can't really film anything else today because we have tree trimmers across the street at a neighbor's house. So I don't want to, hi honey. So I don't want to film too long because I'm sure you guys can hear it in the background, but my dog just like rammed his head into the table. Go ahead. Go ahead. What are you doing? What are you doing? He's such a funny dog. Okay, you done? Again, I try to show you the dog more than me almost when he does this stuff because I know you guys love him so much. Again, sorry if you can hear the tree trimming. We'll try and get through it very quickly. So I'm over halfway done with Wolf and the Woodsman. I definitely read quite a bit yesterday. Like I read a lot yesterday and I stayed up pretty late reading, but I needed to separate myself from the book after an incident in the book happened because I did not like the addition of it. I don't think it was necessary. It's not a spoiler or anything. Actually, it's a trigger warning. I skimmed over it because you could tell what was going on in it, but it does have to do with animal deaths. And it was horrible. It was horrible and unnecessary the way it was described. And if you at all are sensitive about animal things, that will traumatize you. So I don't know. This book is a hard one to recommend to anybody who has any type of animal affinity things. Like if you love animals, to the point where you can't read about them dying, I probably would avoid this book as of this point. Because I was gonna say it was okay because there are hunting montages. So basically, getting into that, the book, at least the first half, this book is kind of split into two halves. The first half is following our main character, shoot, let me look up the pronunciations again. Our main character, EVK, and Gaspar are basically traveling for the first half of this book. They're trying to they're on like a mission to find something, and then they travel to the capital. So that's kind of the first half of this book. And the first half of this book is definitely about romance and forming connections and understanding prejudices. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting to see these two completely different characters create this tentative bond together. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was so much fun. Now, I was okay recommending at least again, I would have to like the whole book, but if I liked the whole book, I was okay with recommending it so far up to that point to animal people because it was mostly just generic hunting things. So it was very off-screen animal deaths and very, like, it was borderline for me, but I think it would be okay because I don't love any type of animal deaths, but hunting off-screen and eating to survive, I was like, okay, you're not seeing any emotions from the animals. You're not seeing any of that stuff. I know people who aren't sensitive to animals are probably like, what the heck is she talking about? Just trust me. This makes sense to other people. But the second that we got to the palace, that one scene, I cannot say that it's okay for people who are very sensitive about animal things to read this at this point. Even if I love it, I would be like very wary about saying to read it. Like I said, it's kind of like split into two parts. So the first part was the travel and all that. And now we're in the capital, and the whole idea of the book has kind of shifted more to focus on the religious persecution. So the second half kind of removes the relationship. Like there hasn't been anything about the relationship in the second half of this book, and it's just been focused on a VK. I haven't even seen Gaspar at this point. If it's focusing on a VK in the palace trying to survive, and her relationship with her father, and her trying to defend her people and stuff like that going on. So I'm still enjoying it. It's just definitely a huge tonal shift. So I feel like this is definitely one of those books that you could love the beginning and then really hate the second half of this book. I will say some of this is really hard to read, especially if you are part of a religion that has a past of being persecuted, because I definitely think the Yahuli, I think is the name of that religion, and they definitely seem to be of like a Jewish descent, and I feel like this would be very difficult to read for a Jewish person because it's very close to home, and it's just every horrible thing you could say about them is they're reliving this. But I like how they're doing it because obviously it's the bad guys who are saying terrible things about them, and you as a VK, because you're in her perspective, you're actually getting to know the Yahuli. You're part of learning about their culture, and I really like that. I think that's interesting. You're kind of seeing just why religious persecution is terrible and makes no sense, and people need to mind their own freaking business is what I'm getting from this book and how I feel in general. Mind your own business. Just be a good person. That's basically what this is saying. Be a good person. Stop judging other people for what they believe in. So I'm enjoying it. There's a lot of information I feel like I'm still missing though. I feel like the magic systems are the problem in this, that they don't make a lot of sense because they haven't been fully explained to me. So that is like the one part I'm still struggling with, is I don't understand magic in this book, and I really want to understand the magic in this book so I can, like, when something crazy happens with magic, I want to be like, oh my gosh, but like something happened and I was like, what? And I had to reread it like 3 times, and I still was like, I don't understand this. So that's like my biggest gripe with this. I think the world building is actually really good, but the magic system building is not. This is really awkward. I hated this. I'm so upset. I am so upset because in the last update, I really was enjoying this book, but Oh my gosh, the last 200 pages were just a nightmare, an absolute nightmare, and I just zoomed through it to be done with this book. I can't believe it. I'm so surprised like how quickly my mind changed about this book. But literally the second half of the book was so not good. The first half was so good. Lots of character development. I loved the travel bit. Normally I don't even like travel. And I loved the character development. I loved all that. And I did love the beginning of them being in the capital. Like I said, I loved seeing the different religions. I loved seeing the Jewish folklore and faith, and oh, it was very, really cool. And apparently there's a bunch of Hungarian mythology in this, but I feel like that side of it, I don't know, was explained very well. Maybe it's just because I don't know it that well. I definitely want to look up some Hungarian mythology because I don't know anything about that. But I do know there was a lot of Jewish mythology. They did the story of the golem, which I thought was really cool. But outside of that, the rest of the book was so bad. So it basically recycled the beginning. The thing that they were looking for at the beginning, they decided to look for again, and that was recycled for like 50 to 60 pages. And then there was like this random fight that made absolutely no sense. And then the battle at the end was like weird. I don't even know how to explain how much I disliked that. And then I think I liked the end, like the epilogue was good. It wrapped up everything very nicely. But at the same time, it reached a point of actually too gory for me as well. So we got to a point where there was another animal death, and that kind of like hit my quota. Like I was already really struggling, and then they had another animal death that was pretty bad, and I was like, yeah, I literally can't recommend this to people because of the amount of very disturbing animal deaths in this, and also the amount of gore in this. This is like horror book level amounts of gore descriptors. I was very surprised. And it was even like, again, I'm really not that bad about gore in books unless it's super, super described, and I was getting a little queasy reading this. Like I could not eat something while I was reading parts of this book. And the romance kind of just fell apart by the end. I feel like there was a really strong foundation for a romance at the beginning, and it was kind of just cast aside when it no longer fit the narrative, and then was brought back towards the end. And I was like, I don't really care at this point. So that kind of ruined that as well. And I really just don't have anything other to say than that the ending was just such a massive letdown compared to the beginning, and very, very, very disappointing. And I just, this is 0 for 2 now with this author, and I'm pretty sure their new book is also going to be an Illumicrate pick later this year. So I'm just like, oh my god. So this author is definitely not for me. My final rating for this one is a 2-star. I would not recommend this to anybody to read just because it's not a very good fantasy book. Really upset. The very first book I read for Illumicrate, it turned out to be a 2-star. Although in my Fairy Loot one, the first book I read for that one was also, I think, a 2-star. So maybe the next two I'll like, because in that one I liked the next two. So that's all I have to say about this one. Really nothing good to say about this except for the beginning. I don't know if I want to start this right away, although I know it's not fantasy, so maybe that's a good thing. But I will be starting She Who Became the Sun, and it does seem more of a historical fiction than fantasy, but we'll see. I feel like as I read it, I'll get to know more about what the actual plot is like. So probably about 50 pages, I'll update you what is actually happening in the plot and how I'm feeling about it at that point. So, but for now, I have to go to the grocery store and pick up some things because we are out of a bunch of stuff. I haven't been to the grocery store in a couple weeks. So we got to get some dinner stuff and some necessities for the house. I get to go do that, which is super fun. But I'll just pop on a podcast. I've been listening to Dead Meat, which is one of my favorite podcasts. They're a horror movie review podcast that I absolutely love. They recap whole movies, so it's really fun to listen to them. And then I'll probably put some Morbid on too if I get bored of that. Okay, it took me a little bit, but I finally started She Who Became the Sun. I was not expecting to immediately love it as much as I am, because this is definitely not something that I would seek out. This is definitely not something that I would on purpose try to read, because it is definitely historical fiction. There is like a paranormal aspect to it that is very interesting, but so far it's not like super important. It just kind of exists. I don't know like how important it's going to end up being, but we're following our main character, and she is from a super poor family. This is actually taken directly from like real historical time, so it's taking place in 1345 at the beginning, and it goes through different time periods, and there's a little historical note at the beginning, which is really cool, and it kind of explains that there was this period of time when the Mongols were controlling northern China, and there were a lot of like very poor people, and I mean, the beginning is rough. So it says part 1 is 1345 to 1354, and it intros with our main character whose whole family has died except for her father and her brother. And I do know that China for a while had like the one-child rule. I think they just got rid of that a few years ago. I would need to check that. But I know they had the one-child rule for a while, and it became a big issue because in China, your sons are very important still. And this was especially true in this book. So you find out like pretty early on that a lot of these families, because they couldn't feed everybody, would feed their sons and let the daughters starve. And that's where we were kind of going, like in her perspective, it was starting to go that direction. Like the father and the son were eating a little better than she was. So she was trying to go out and finding her own food. And you see these kids running around, beating on rocks, eating crickets, trying to catch lizards, trying to catch mice. And that's what they were eating because there was no food otherwise. Sorry, one of my neighbors I don't know what's going on with my neighbors lately. They heard this like huge crash and I was like, oh my God, what happened? But yeah, so if you hear some like background noise earlier in the video, sorry about that. Anyway, it sounds like they've stopped whatever they were doing. Go ahead. Go ahead, up. Go ahead, up. He stinks. He just went outside. So anyway, this book is picking up, like I said, poor family, etc. And then something happens and she ends up, this isn't like a surprise, her brother dies and she ends up taking over his identity basically, which wasn't exactly very hard in this time period, and she looks just like him. So she takes his like Buddhist pendant and then goes to a monastery and basically begs until she's admitted. And that's kind of like how the story kicks off. And it is intense. It is so intense. This is probably one of the more intense books, at least the beginning, that I've ever read, because it was quite brutal. But I'm at page 62 and I'm about to start chapter 4, and I really am enjoying it. I like the way this is written. It's very like written in a very storytelling way, so you just kind of want to continue. The flow of the story is so good. That's kind of my initial thoughts on it. I feel like this is one that I'm not gonna have a lot to say about because it's like more of a historical nature. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of twists. It's just gonna be like a really cool story. So for this one, I probably won't update until I'm finished, unless I start really not liking it or DNF it, etc. Kind of like that. So I'm gonna just continue enjoying it. I am going to probably be reading some at work again today and then continue into this week. I don't know how long this is gonna take because, again, it is historical fiction, so it could take a while because sometimes it is harder to pick back up. But once I've picked it up, it then goes really smoothly. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at with this one. It's very interesting. I'm surprised I'm liking this one more than the fantasy that I just read, but I don't know. The writing is just really, really good. So I'm on chapter 7, which is 112 pages in, and I definitely feel a lot different about this book at this point. I am really bored now, and this is what I was worried about it being like historical fiction, because it's definitely historical fiction, like hardcore historical fiction, not something I would ever pick up. And I really loved the beginning. I love the beginning when we were following our main character who was training to be a monk, and I really loved that. I thought that was so much fun. But suddenly we've like switched perspectives and it's giving us like more of a wartime perspective, which I knew we were going to go into. Like, I know this is like a wartime book, but I don't know, like I feel like we should have just followed the same perspective through the book. And now that we've switched perspective to like she's a daughter of a deceased general, and I'm not interested whatsoever. So I'm having such a hard time picking this up. And then I don't like how the narration of our main character has changed, because she's still like partly a main character. I don't enjoy where it's gone, and like the way that she's narrating is super weird now. It's completely different than the beginning. So I feel so weird about it, and I'm really disappointed that I'm not loving it like I was at the beginning. Like, I thought this was like 4 or 5 star material, and now I'm like, am I gonna be DNFing this one? So I don't know. I'm gonna continue reading. I'm gonna try giving it another couple chapters. Hopefully, the chapters are really long too. That's not helping. I'm gonna try giving it a couple more chapters and see maybe if my opinion changes, if I start liking it more. But if I don't, this is probably heading into DNF territory. Update on She Who Became the Sun. I am at page 140, and I am officially DNFing this. I am so upset. I'm so upset. After the 70-page mark, it was just like I was hit by this brick wall where I just could not care less about what was going on at that point. And it's because it definitely, like, I feel like the first 70 pages were following the life of this one character, which I like. That's the aspect of historical fiction that I enjoy. It's following a single character and the troubles that they go through and the struggle and what they have to do to survive and get through these tough times. I love that. That's the part about historical fiction I absolutely love. And then this switched to a new character, and it became all about like the war and what all these different people are doing and the moves that are being made in the war. And because it became about so many other people, I just lost interest in it. So I did not think it was fair to continue reading this, mostly because this just isn't my type of genre. It's not my type of story. I can see that this is a very well-written book just from loving those first 70 pages. I can tell it's like a well-written, good book. It's just not my genre, so I'm not going to end up liking it. And I don't think it's fair to finish a book and then know it's going to be under a 3-star, because that's what it's going to be, because my enjoyment level is at like a 0 right now, which is so unfortunate. So I'm DNFing at 140 pages. I really tried. I picked it up and put it down so many times after that 70-page mark, and I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm not going to force myself to read another 300 pages for this book. I'm not doing that. And now we're moving on to Empire of the Vampire, which is like very painful. I was actually going to add another book to this video because I DNF'd, because that was part of like my initial plan, was if I DNF a book, I'll replace it with something else. But this book is like 900 pages, I think. This book, oh no. I was going off of like my Scribd copy because I was able to get a physical copy on Scribd. It is 700 pages, a little over 700 pages. That's a really long book for me. And it's going to be intense because it's J. Kristoff. And this book took me like 2 weeks to read 140 pages. So I'm behind on my reading schedule for this. So I feel like there's enough content and there'll be enough with this that I'm not going to add another one, because I think the next one was Iron Widow. And I don't want to rush to put that in there because I've heard really good things about that book. I just don't want to throw it in at the end and rush through it. So I'm going to stick to just these 3 books. Unfortunately, one was a DNF, but we are starting Empire of the Vampire. Hopefully this is not a DNF, and I really like this one. I'm really nervous. And it's really cool because today he just said the name of the new book. I don't remember what it's called, but he just announced the name of the new book and said it's coming in 2024. So I thought that was apt to be starting this today, and the announcement for the next book just came out. So anyway, that's what we're going to be doing. I'm very nervous. I might even take a little bit of a break because I'm a bit in a reading slump after DNFing that, because oh my god, it took just so much of my like brain power, and I don't have that much to begin with. So I might go ahead and do a is booktube wrong video and just read The Fourth Wing for like a reading vlog. I think that might be fun, and that might kind of get me out of a little bit of a reading slump, because I also have a bunch of library books, and I just got approved for a ton of books on NetGalley. So I'm just like, oh my god, I'm gonna go do things, because I do have some things to do today, and then I will get to reading. But I don't work until next Friday, so I have like a solid week to just like get through this book. Okay, I finally made a valiant effort going into Empire of the Vampire. I am, how far am I? Not that far. 72 pages in. I'm really not that far. I feel like I've been reading this book for days because of the style of it. Like, I really like it. So it's this, now that I've started it, I kind of have a better idea of what it's about, but it's like this narrative style. So it's a story within a story kind of thing. So we have our main character, I want to say it's pronounced probably Gabriel, because I think it's French, because his name's Gabriel de Leon. So it could be Gabriel. I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, but that's our main character, and he is a silver saint, which is part vampire, part human. And he is the very last silver saint, apparently, and he is in the dungeons of the vampires at the vampire somewhere court, I don't know. And a interrogator, basically a historian, has come in and is having Gabriel tell his whole life story from when he was a child up to where he currently is. So it is so interesting, this story, because he's telling it like third person, like to the historian. So it feels like like you're the historian almost, and he's telling the story to you, kind of. So it's really neat. Like, I like how the story is told. There's just so much information that it took a while for me to like really like grasp what was going on, because there's a lot of different names for things, because the vampires aren't really called vampires. They're called wretcheds sometimes. They're also called cold ones, which I've seen a lot in books, but there's like different types of vampires, because some go crazy, some rot. The way that a vampire made is different than a lot of books that I've read. So there's just a lot going on. There's a lot going on. It's really hard to try to like orient myself while reading this book, but I'm enjoying it. I just know it's going to take a really long time, because it's definitely not a book I'm itching to pick up, because it's not like constantly action-packed. It's also like day-to-day things he's doing. And right now I'm at the point where he has been taken by the order, I don't know what the order's called, whatever the Order of the Silver Saints is, and they're at this like big church, and it's a very religious organization. So right now he's being like brought into this organization because they're stronger and faster, and they have some powers of like the vampires. So they're the best, the most ideal to kill them. So he's going through that right now. When he was 13, yeah, no, he's older now. 13 was something happened with his sister. He's probably 16, 17 now, I think, and has been taken away from his family, etc. So it's very complicated. There's a lot going on, but it's told in such a storybook fashion. It's pretty easy to follow along. So this is the similar thing to like Pride of the Orange Tree. I was terrified to read Pride of the Orange Tree, but it turned out to be significantly easier to read, and the same thing with this. This is significantly easier to read than I thought. It's just gonna take a lot of willpower to get through it. So luckily I have the Kindle version of this as well, so I was able to read some at work. And then I also am waiting for the audiobook. And that's kind of the little update that I have. I'm trying to be done this week. So I'm going to focus on reading this, even though I've gotten sidetracked by some other books, but I'm going to try and finish it this week. I feel like today was one of those days where nothing went right. So do you know when you think you want to do something and then you do it and then you realize that you really didn't want to do it? Yeah, that was 7 hours of my life today. I could have been reading or doing things that I enjoyed, but I have like an obsessive gene, so my brain really wanted to attempt to make a movie reaction channel as a secondary channel on YouTube, and so I was so excited, got the horror movie stuff, figured out how to get the movie, figured all that stuff out, spent an hour and a half watching the movie, recording, and then spent 6 hours editing it and uploading various things. And then I got to the end when I finally put it on YouTube, and I was like, I don't want to do this. And I was like, oh my gosh, how much time did I waste today? But at the same time, I won't ever try it again, so I guess it kind of helped in the long run. But it just wasn't fun. Like, it took the fun out of watching the movie and doing my thing. It felt like I had to perform, and I didn't like that. So we're gonna stick to booktube. So anyway, let's quickly talk about my update, because that's what you guys are actually here for Empire the Vampire. I'm 120, actually might be farther now. I'm 132 pages into the book, and unfortunately I'm really not enjoying it that much. I'm I'm very torn because I like sections of it, but then other sections I'm just kind of bored and feel like I'm wading through them. And again, it's a situation of I don't feel like this book needs to be as long as it is, but here we are. I don't think I'm in like trouble of DNFing this one because I feel like I'm going to like the overall story. I just am having a hard time wading through everything that's happening. And then I just started part 2 because this is told in parts. And part 1 started when he was a kid and moved into when he becomes a Silver Saint, an initiate. And then part 2 starts towards the end of him being a Silver Saint. It's 3 years before he's in the prison talking to the vampire. So it's a big jump, very random. I am glad it happened though, because there was a death that I was expecting to happen of an animal. It's very obvious that this animal is no longer around based on how Gabriel is talking. This is going to be dragged out to the end when I really care about the animal like a lot, and then they're going to kill it and I'm going to be really upset. Luckily, they did not do that. I was obviously still upset, but I was able to kind of not let it ruin the book, because sometimes that happens with me if an animal death is too traumatic, like a pet-like animal. So I'm glad it was early on and I didn't have to deal with the trauma of it later. So I am grateful for that, but there's still plenty of time to ruin my day in this book. I did get the audiobook because I'm really struggling reading the physical copy of the book. So I have both of the ebook and I have the audiobook. So in the morning when I wake up, I'll read the ebook, and then when I'm doing my diamond painting in the afternoon, I listen to the audiobook. So I will most likely be listening to the audiobook later today and getting through some more of it, because it's just a slog. It feels like I've been reading it for a really long time, but it really hasn't been that long. So that's kind of my mini update. I don't know how I feel about it right now. Hey, we are finally at the 50% mark of Empire of the Vampire. Oh my gosh, I feel like I've been reading this literally for forever. I feel like I've said that already, but that's what it feels like. It feels like I've been reading this forever. That doesn't mean I don't like it. It also doesn't mean that I do like it. I still don't know how I feel about this. I feel like in the last update I said I didn't know how I felt about it. I still don't know how I feel about it. I feel like I'm not gonna know how I feel about it until it ends, because it's just a lot. It's so much. I feel like there's too much detail. Like, I don't need to know every second of every minute of this person's life, like that they stepped right and then left, and then it's just narrated too much. It's just too much. But I finally feel like we have a purpose. I feel like the first 50% was literally just about this guy's life and like learning about the world. That's literally, now like looking back on it, that's what it felt like, was learning about the world, etc. And now we finally understand kind of like the mission. Like, now it feels like a mission. There's a purpose to things. The relationships are finally starting to make sense. I feel like there's now a drive in the book to keep going, because that's what I was really struggling with in the first half, was just this drive to pick it up, because I actually wanted to pick it up, but after reading a chapter I'd put it down and be like, eh. So that's kind of how the past, what page am I on? That's how the past 360 pages have been going. And I feel like I finally understand something and feel this drive to pick it up more, because there's a goal. We have a goal finally. And it's just, and I was gonna like recap a little bit, but I literally can't. Like, and I don't even know if there's any spoilers in this. It's just like, I guess the goal, the purpose is a spoiler, so I won't talk about that, because it did take 360 pages to, you know, give us a purpose. So obviously there's a spoiler, which is why it took so long. So that's really my update. I was hoping I'd have a more concise, more detailed update at 50%, but I don't. It's just, this book exists, and I'm reading it, and we have a purpose now. So I'm gonna continue reading it. I probably will not update again until the end, because I don't feel like my opinions on it are gonna change, like I said, until the end, until I finish. So we're just gonna go with that. I'm just gonna read until I'm done. I don't know how long it's gonna take. I was thinking I'd be done this book by the end of this week. On Monday, I think I was like, oh, I should be able to finish 500 pages by Friday. Well, it's Wednesday, and I think I've only read 100 since Monday, and I just don't have this desire to like pick it up because, and you don't have the desire because I just read an entire novella yesterday that was 100 pages, and I read an entire novella today that was 120 pages. So I know I can read, I know there's a drive to read, it just doesn't exist with this book, and I think it's just because it's so dense and there's so much stuff going on, and it felt like it was world building for 360 pages. So I'm just taking my time, I'm getting through it. I managed to get 50%, which is huge to me, so we're just gonna continue reading and plod along through the book. If you couldn't guess from the way that my face looks, it's so puffy. I have to go somewhere in 45 minutes, and I don't think this puffiness is going to go away. Oh my gosh, it's so bad. I feel like I popped some, like, blood vessels, possibly, from the crying. Yeah, I finished the book, this one. I finished this one. And I spent probably the last, the last, like, 30 pages I didn't cry. I was more, like, mouth open, like, oh my god. Just completely shocked after surprise after, oh my gosh, last 30 pages. But the last, like, I would say 200 pages. The last 200 pages, just sobbed through the whole thing. Just sobbed through the whole thing. It's funny because this book, I've been reading this book since June 4th, apparently. It's apparently according to Goodreads. I'm going to assume that is accurate. And it is June 16th. So it really didn't take me that long. But it's funny because it took me from June 4th to June 15th. That's how long it took me to read about 400 pages. And then the last 350 pages took me like 4 hours. Because it just like, after there's like a thing that happens, there's a point that you hit in the story at that like 400 mark. There's like a big death scene. I'm not telling you who dies. I mean, it's a Jake Kristoff, you know people die. So there's a big death scene, and from that point on, the book is just like, let's go. And oh my god. Obviously there's some things in this that I don't like love. I don't even know how to talk about this concisely because my reading experience was a 4 and then a 2 and then a 3 and then a 1 and then a 5 and then a 3 and then a 5 again. So my brain just hurts. And like, I hate this book and I love it at the same time. This is one of those books that I feel like a rating doesn't really do it justice. I'm gonna give it a 4.5. I can't give it a 5 because it legitimately is a soul-sucking misery of a book. Like, it is just miserable. There is rarely anything good that happens in this book, and it is just absolute misery. So I can't because I'm gonna be sitting here for the rest of the day just like wallowing in misery about how I feel, and I have to wait. Like, I'm really glad I waited to read this because this came out September 2021, and the next book's not coming out until, I think it said next year. So I'm really glad I didn't read this like in 2021. I'm glad that I read it closer. When the next one comes out, I'll probably read it then, and then it was gonna be another 3 years for the next book, and I get why these take long to write. This book, writing, 5-star. Writing is amazing, phenomenal, perfection. The writing is perfection. The storyline, it's probably a 5 as well, but it's just so miserable. For me, I have to knock it down. I can see why people give us 5 stars though. Storytelling, 5-star. I mean, it's so good. It just makes me feel like a puddle of tears. My existence is liquid right now. So I'm just like, I just physically cannot give this a 5-star. But I don't even know who I would recommend this to. If you want to cry, if you want to be miserable, if you like feeling like your insides are on your outsides while reading this book, if you want to be stressed, if you want to lose everything that you love, read this book. If you like really good storytelling, this is a very, very well written story, and I'm very interested to see what's going to come next, because you kind of get like a little hint at the very end, because I feel like I've talked about it already, but in this book we're following Gabriel, who's the last Silver Saint, and he's telling his whole life story in a cell to a vampire historian. And you kind of get a hint about what's going on in the story, because they tell you he's the last Silver Saint. They tell you that right away. They tell you that he's kind of alone, etc. And then you get through the whole story, and it bounces between like 3 years ago, I think, and his childhood, and in the monastery where he's taught to be a Silver Saint. So it bounces between those two perspectives, which I definitely liked one more than the other. I liked when he was in the monastery better. It definitely was more uplifting and happy compared to the storyline where he's basically the same age as he is current day. But I loved, my favorite was him talking to the historian vampire. It was so cool. I loved that part. And then, like I said, the monastery sections were also my favorite. I mean, I liked the other sections, but they definitely were like, the monastery section seemed like a reprieve, and then it was like, okay, we're going to the next part, be ready. And then it would break and bring you back to monastery. It'd be like, okay, give you a little breather. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts about the general plot line. But at the very end, when you're talking to the vampire in history, it kind of gives you an idea of where the next two books are going to go with the storytelling, which is interesting. I kind of like that, because it's like a sneak peek. It's like a, what happens next? It's almost like a soap opera where it's like tomorrow on. That's kind of what it feels like at the end. So I'm really excited to see where it's going next. It's gonna be depressing. I feel like it's only gonna get more depressing, I think. I don't know at this point, because this was really depressing. I actually don't know if it could be any more depressing than this first book was. I feel like this first book opened and it was like, let's show you how bad it can get. Let's really show you how bad it can get. So I don't think it could be more depressing at this point, because my worst case scenario happened in this book. So it's all up from here, right? Right? Anyway, yeah, I'm giving it a 4.5 for sheer, I don't even know. It's just getting a 4.5. I did round it down to 4 on Goodreads, because I cannot bring myself to give it 5 stars because of how depressed it's making me feel. But yeah, 4.5 sounds about right. And that finishes our first Illumicrate vlog. This was like a wild ride. This was an absolute wild ride. We had The Wolf and the Woodsman that started off very, very strong. And I think, what did I give it? A 2 or a 2.5? I think I gave it a 2. Gave it a 2 because I didn't like the back half of the book, and it was a little too gory and violent, which is funny because Emperor of the Vampire is gory and violent and still didn't feel as violating as this one did. So this was definitely not a winner. Very upset about this. Second Ava read that I didn't like. So I'm definitely going to be doing a Last Chance Author when their new book comes out, because it's going to be an Illumicrate choice, I believe is what they already said. So either way, I will be attempting that book for Last Chance Author for Ava Reed. And then we had the weirdest one, I feel like. We had She Who Became the Sun, which now I'm really glad I kind of didn't like it, because Illumicrate just announced the second book they're going to be selling it. And I really hate buying special editions from Illumicrate, because it's just so expensive. Like, it's even more expensive than buying Fairy Loot UK editions, because like Fairy Loot now does all their special editions US versus UK, so it's really cool. I get to buy them from the US shop, but when I was still buying them from the UK shop, it was still not as expensive as the Illumicrate ones. So I just don't like buying Illumicrate special editions. I only have a very small number, the Uprooted and Spinning Silver set I have, and I think that's like it. I think that's it, and I just got their monthly box. It's just so expensive. So I'm really glad that I ended up DNFing this. I didn't hate it. I was just really bored. It just wasn't for me. Too much historical fiction. It was just historical fiction. I'm just not a fan of it. And then, as I said, I just finished Emperor of the Vampire. This is definitely the obvious winner. My head hurts, my face hurts, everything just hurts after reading this book. But it was the winner. It got a 4.5, very high. But Illumicrate's still not doing well. I'm gonna be updating like my spreadsheets. I just haven't gotten to it. I think Fairy Loot stayed about the same. I think I started with Fairy Loot like a 4.11 or something, and I think it's like a 4.08 now because I was giving stuff. Oh, because Incendiary got like 2 stars, so that really hurt it. But I gave one 5, and I think, what was the other one that I did? Oh, Daughter of the Moongrass was a 4.5, so I think it just kind of like evened out with the 2. Illumicrate though, I guess the DNF doesn't hurt it that much. It just kind of goes into my mental bank of like how many I've DNF from a company. So the 2 hurts it because I think Illumicrate was at like a 3.5 because I'd only read like 3 books from them to start with. So the 4.5 actually might bump it up quite a bit. I haven't checked. I'll stick it in right here what Illumicrate started at and what they are at now for star ratings. So anyway, that was the vlog. I finished it finally. I'm actually surprised I got through. It's Friday. I just realized I actually did get through Empire the Vampire by Friday. Very excited for me. So anyway, I had an interesting time with this vlog. I feel like I didn't love it. Didn't super enjoy myself, but I also like had a good time at the same time. It was a weird one. It was a really, really weird one. And I'm just really stressed. So I'm going to end the vlog here while I'm still really stressed. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you subscribe for more content. We're going to be doing another book box thing where I'm going to read more book box books. I think I'm going to do Owlcrate because I feel like Owlcrate's going to have like chill books that I'm not going to have to worry about. And yeah, so make sure you like the video, make sure you comment down below if you read these books, what you thought about them. If you want to read any of these, what Illumicrate books that you've liked. Like I said, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.